Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show. Obviously not been just his twin from another mother, Anoa Changa. Happy to be here with you on this, is it Thursday? Wow, this week has gone by so fast. I hope Ben is enjoying his 8 o'clock hour off this week. Really excited to chop it up with you. I'm excited to be here with some more good things going on because there's so much crap going on everywhere. So it's really exciting when I get to talk about cool things happening in the world. But I think we have a Black History of the Day trivia fact to share, right, David? And it actually lines up with something else I wanted to talk about, too. So this is actually really cool. So, Dr. Mack, shout out to Dr. Carl Mack, has the BlackHeritageDays.com calendar. And today we were like, oh, what's going to be the fact for the day tomorrow? And I thought talking about Black history on Throwback Thursday was the perfect combination. And it lines up with another story I want to talk about, too. So what is the fact for today, guys?
On May 12, 1980, Norma Holloway Johnson received her commission to serve as a judge on the United States District of Columbia. While she originally planned on a career in education, the historic 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision spurred her to switch careers from teaching to law. She enrolled at Georgetown University Law Center in 1962 and became the first Black woman to graduate the program. Her nomination by President Jimmy Carter resulted in Johnson becoming the first Black woman to serve as Chief Judge of a United States District Court. Adapted from Black Heritage Day calendar by author, lecturer and civil rights activist Dr. Carl Mack.
Yeah, that is super exciting because I want to talk about another Black judge today. And then we were checking, we were like, hey, what's the Black history fact of the day? And this was really cool that this lined up with what I wanted to talk about. But I'm also really excited because little Anoa, once upon a time, wanted to be a lawyer and she became a lawyer. But beyond being a lawyer, little Anoa used to want to be a judge. So I get really excited when I learn about really dope Black judges in particular, dope judges generally, but dope Black judges, because, that's just there's a little, in an alternate universe somewhere, little Anoa did grow up to become a judge. But today, I want to talk about some news that actually had me really excited to report on yesterday for news1.com. Judge Carlton Reeves from Mississippi, a member of the Magnolia Bar Association, the second Black judge in the state of Mississippi to be appointed to the federal bench. Judge Reeves is actually pretty dope from what I've been able to read. And I was really excited because he's been nominated by President Biden. And, I'm over here I was telling the guys when we were doing prep, I was like, oh my God, President Biden got me over here being a stand this week because he's made a couple good appointments recently. But Judge Reeves has been nominated to be the new chair of the U.S. Sentencing Commission. He would be the first person to be in that role and the 8th chair of the U.S. Sentencing Commission since it was established in 1984 during the Reagan administration. What I found particularly interesting about Judge Reeves is that ever since ascending to the bench in 2010, he was an Obama appointee. He has not held back from being a part of the community. He has not held back from speaking his mind about injustice. So here's a clip of him talking about Trump to the Klan lawyers. He has been very, very vocal about the history of lynching and racism in America, in Mississippi. He spoke out against Trump's attacks on federal judges in 2019. There's all this hand-wringing now about, oh my God, people are protesting SCOTUS members and justices and blah, blah, blah. President Trump, as president of the United States, actively attacked judges on social media who were overturning the various different bans and rulings that he was trying to implement during his term. And so in 2019, Judge Reeves, had blistering remarks for President Trump, but he also called on other members of the judiciary to start speaking up on the attacks that were happening on their profession. And that might seem like small fries for some people because they're like, well, we all were calling out President Trump. Right. But when you're in a position position like that, that is usually not something that's seen as like the right way to behave in public. And this is a man that is at the height of his profession, who very much understands also the weight that he carries with him into that office. The other thing that I found interesting when I was reading about him in 2015, when he was reading ahead of the sentencing of 3 white supremacists who were part of a group, a gang attack, for lack of a better phrase, who murdered a Black man in Jackson, Mississippi. He used that moment to illustrate and teach on the history of lynching specifically and the decimation of Black life in the state of Mississippi, drawing a through line between lynching, the civil rights movement, and the deaths that happened during the civil rights movement to that specific case, as well as setting forth a challenge for those in Mississippi about the type of Mississippi they want to see in the future and the work that folks were already doing and continuing to do. And I just found like NPR reran the full speech in 2015 in the clip. The article, hopefully folks can drop it in the chat that I wrote yesterday, has a link to the speech as well. But the other thing that I found that was really exciting, I mean, this dude like got factoids on factoids on factoids that are just really fascinating. And, nobody's perfect. I'm sure, there are folks out there that got gripes with different rulings. I think he has currently been overseeing a case potentially with a consent decree around the Hinds County Jail. Hinds County is where Jackson, Mississippi sits. But in 2019, he was also the judge that issued the injunction that blocked Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban that's at the heart of the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization case. Now we're waiting for the decision from SCOTUS. So, Judge Reeves has been like critical. I think Ryan Naves, who runs Reckon, which is a Southern publication, was just like, oh, look, it's dad getting the boost. So some of the people that I respect are also like really excited from, that area. So, Judge Reeves being nominated as chair of the Sentencing Commission, I think while you are not going to fundamentally change the way in which sentencing and the federal justice system works, I mean, having someone with this understanding of the intricacies of racial injustice within systemic systems, as well as the way in which it interplays in the criminal justice system itself, could go a long way in terms of the Sentencing Commission. The other thing that's been interesting is that since 2019, the Sentencing Commission has not had a quorum. So they haven't actually been able to do business. They haven't been able to set down guidance for federal judges. One way this has shown up is actually in the fact that during the pandemic, when, different judges were trying to figure out how to deal with compassionate release for particularly, folks with different health conditions, elder folks, because of the COVID-19 pandemic and conditions inside, there was no real guidance from the U.S. Sentencing Commission. And that would have been a role that the full 7-member body would have played. The Sentencing Commission should, at its full force, have 7 members that serve a staggering 6-year terms. Currently, there is one acting chair whose term has actually already expired, but he's just holding on, waiting for other folks to come on. So the Biden administration appointed a full slate. There are, according to the way it was laid out, the Sentencing Commission should have no more than 4 members of the same party, and at least 3 have to be federal judges. All the members of the Sentencing Commission do not have to be judges. The Sentencing Commission also works in coordination with a core set of advocacy groups. The Sentencing Commission came up quite a bit during soon-to-be Justice. She hasn't been sworn in yet, so I just call her soon-to-be Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson confirmation hearing, quite a bit in terms of her role and just like departure from the guidelines. So, I mean, the Sentencing Commission, it's like one of those things that's like, but it actually could mean something in terms of the way in which, federal sentencing does actually happen. And we've seen some tweaks already made in the past in terms of the adjustment of crack cocaine. And, who knows what we'll see going forward with this new slate of appointees going on to the Sentencing Commission. But Judge Reeves was actually someone I was really excited to get to write about. And I'm looking forward to talking more with folks from the Magnolia Bar Association, hopefully this week. So maybe I'll have some more to share with you down the line. The other thing I wanted to talk about, just thinking and, Abortion. I know y'all like, damn, I know I've been talking about abortion all week long. Let me tell you, let me kick it to you straight, right? Like, this is real. This is very real. What was really cool, because I love social media sometimes, because you get to stumble upon the personal musings and really interesting thoughts and conversations of other people. And, people can say social media isn't real life. I mean, no, my inner monologue in the world I create in my own head is not real life, but it does let you know how people are seeing things and viewing the world, right? And what was really cool is I stumbled across, I can't remember who it was, but, shout out to this person because they were kind of brilliant with this. They were talking about the movie Dirty Dancing. And if you haven't seen Dirty Dancing, I'm sorry for the spoilers, but the movie's been out for like over 30 something, almost 40 years, right, at this point. But there is an abortion plot in the movie Dirty Dancing. And it's, in the comments, someone shared a post from the movie, I don't know if it was the writer or the director, but talking about how they had to fight to keep that illegal abortion scene in, right? Because they wanted people in the 80s watching this movie to understand how dangerous it had been, but it also was a very real storyline, right? You have a young woman, her economic viability depends upon her job. She has no time off. I mean, everyone's like, oh my God, baby learns to dance, baby and Johnny. But like, the whole reason why baby learns to dance is because Penny got knocked up by Robbie the Creep. Right. And he wouldn't acknowledge her. He had no intention of marrying her. I think that's actually the 60s. The movie comes out in the early 80s, but I think that's actually the 60s. So it's pre-Roe. There's a doctor traveling through with a dirty knife and a folding table, and the rest is, in the movie. But what I was really interested in was just how we have seen there are other subtle depictions of these types of conversations and issues happening in other movies. A few nights ago, I was actually watching a classic, an urban classic. If you grew up as a young Black girl like me, Just Another Girl in the IRT is an indie film that came out. I think it's 1993 officially it came out. But there is a scene where the main character, Chantel, who is a junior in high school, is pregnant, and she goes to a clinic, and the clinic worker is trying to explain to her how she can't advise her about abortion. She can't talk to her about abortion because she could actually get fired. She would be breaking rules if she gave her any more information than just the fact that that is an option. She couldn't tell her any more specifics or anything else like that, right? And so when we're thinking about these different abortion restrictions, whether it's like, blatant, just outright illegal abortion and what the lengths people might go to be able to terminate a pregnancy they do not want and cannot have, or just even trying to make a decision, right? And when we're also thinking about younger folks, like, 16, 17, 18-year-olds trying to navigate this process without any really good information, there are so many issues and layers to this. And so one of the things that I thought was really powerful yesterday was, although the Senate, surprise, surprise, did not vote to pass or to vote the Women's Health Protection Act forward, which, everyone's like, yeah, they're going to vote again and it's going to fail. I mean, I do actually think it matters that they're even trying to take up the vote. Now, whether it's political theater or not is a whole different conversation and story. But I do think that the House, the women in the House in particular, the folks in the House in particular, because it's not just women. I can't remember which male representative it is who has been speaking up about the abortion that he and his wife ended up having to go through in order to save her life. But, the folks who've been speaking up about their abortion stories from inside of the House has been really, really powerful. And, for some people, abortion is just it's a decision that they've made. For myself personally, it's a decision that I've made. I've made my peace with it years ago, and I have no qualms. I've spoken with my family privately about it so that just in case my kids or another loved one ever saw me speaking about it, they wouldn't be like caught off guard. But, I don't have a lot of pain and trauma associated with the decision itself, right? There was shame and guilt at the time, and I've overcome that because I realized that shame and that guilt had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with my family, had to do with a society that treats us as if we're somehow flawed or wrong for making a personal medical decision about our bodies, right? But there are folks who do share painful experiences, who are recounting and retelling for the world the umpteenth time their stories. You have various representatives. So here we see on the screen members of, there goes my Congresswoman, Nikema Williams, but you have members of the House that marched over to the Senate side yesterday ahead of their vote or during their vote, I forget the exact timeline, to really, when they're talking about people are being bullied or putting pressure, they don't like outcomes. You got the House telling the Senate, do your damn job. The House. The House of Representatives, folks is like, you holding up progress. We go back to our districts because we've done our job. Y'all are holding up progress. And for the most part, the majority of the Democratic caucus, sans one, votes the way that the people need them to vote. And so the response is that y'all just need to elect more Democrats. Now, I understand that strategically from the Democratic caucus perspective in the Senate. I think folks also really need to be able to name the fact that they have a member of their caucus that is obstructing justice and equity for everyone in the country. And they need to be very clear that Joe Manchin has an outsized influence on what can happen, and that the possibility, like the function of the Senate, like as it functions right now, is flawed and people can't move forward. Like that's a better argument than just saying like, well, we just got to keep voting. We just got to keep voting. You got to give people more, right? Than just, we just got to keep voting. I definitely do think that, to maintain a majority makes sense and expand it makes sense, strategically from their vantage point. We already know that if Republicans get the majority, they are planning on, advancing a federal abortion ban. It will go nowhere because the president will surely, I believe that the president will actually veto, such a ban. And as long as the House maintains its majority, it's not going anywhere either. But they can't just keep talking around and saying, oh, well, this isn't happening or this, that, and the other. I mean, you really actually have to name it. Like Joe Manchin is not in favor of advancing protections for abortion and, reproductive health. He's not in favor of advancing the child tax credit and making it permanent to uplift millions of parents and children out of poverty. He's not in favor of advancing and supporting extensions to the Pell Grant or any type of financial adjustment that would make college not just affordable, but like get the debt burden off of people's backs. Like Joe Manchin isn't really in favor of anything that doesn't help benefit his own coal mine that he has in West Virginia, right? And the donors that support him. It's funny because someone was saying to me, well, Joe Manchin is going to lose his seat in 2024 anyway. Joe Manchin has been my senator. Joe Manchin has been my governor. Y'all who know me know I used to live in West Virginia. I'm excited to be going back next week. But Joe Manchin does just enough to maintain his power. So even though he tried to play, kingmaker and endorse in the Republican primary in a race in West Virginia, they had their primary earlier this week, and his candidate lost against a Trump-backed, nut. That does not mean that he's going to lose his race unless the next 2 years, folks on the ground in the Mountain State, the mountain mamas on the ground, shout out to Holler Justice and so many other people who do amazing work in West Virginia, get the support. They don't need your lecturing. They don't need your dismissiveness. They need your dollars. They need your time. They need your treasure. They need lots of treasure. They need all the buried treasure you got. And they need your talents to help them move forward. So if you want Joe Manchin to have a real serious primary challenger, if you want to really see something happen, you got to just support the people on the ground doing the work. Give them the training, give them the support, give them the dollars, give them what they need, and save your judgment for some other space and place. Because who knows what's really going on where you are too. Right. But I wanted to kick to Ayanna Pressley because Ayanna Pressley, who is a co-sponsor of the Women's Health Protection Act on the House side, she had an amazing, we just play a few minutes, there's a short little bit of her floor remarks. I mean, Ayanna Pressley just gives so much every time she speaks anyway, but I was really, really moved by, just the connections that she was making in terms of the way in which this fight around abortion and bodily autonomy really does matter to everyone. And when we're really thinking about voting rights, I know there's some Democrats like, Representative Clyburn, who's like, oh, well, people really care about voting rights. Like abortion is really not that big of a deal. Dude, of course you don't think abortion is that big of a deal. It doesn't affect you. But like all of these rights, like all of these fundamental rights that have to be established, like the right for us to exist and express our bodily autonomy, our self-determination, those are all the same thing. People have put their bodies on the line for voting rights the same way they have for abortion rights, the same way they have for the access to education, the same way they have for LGBTQ issues. Like I saw this thread this morning that really upset me. And it was like, well, Democrats are the reason why we have all the civil rights we have now. But Democratic Party has had to be pushed every step of the way. The Voting Rights Act came after Bloody Sunday. Let's not get it twisted. The Voting Rights Act came after people were murdered in Mississippi. Let's not get it twisted, right? Like when we think about the Reconstruction Amendments, those Reconstruction Amendments came after how many years of slavery? How many people had to die for the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments to get passed? And how many other bills were killed that would have further enshrined civil rights for Black people and others who came to this country after us in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because people chose to kumbaya, kiki with their white brothers in the South instead of making sure that we had actual, a real Reconstruction. So save it that the politicians did their job. We need to come out and vote for them. Folks need to continue to be reminded. Democracy, I do agree. Democracy is not a spectator sport. You have to always be constantly engaged, but accountability is absolutely a part of that process. And if you don't like having somebody's foot on your neck, if you don't like being told that you need to do your damn job, you just need to do your job. That's like when you were a little kid, right? You don't want your mom nagging you about doing your homework. Just do your homework. Just clean your room. But let's get a few minutes of just a little bit of this Ayanna Pressley clip because, she's life-giving.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in solidarity with the 1 in 4 women across this country who have had an abortion and every person who will ever seek abortion care. Your neighbor, co-worker, family member, those whom you work with, and yes, those whom you worship with too. The mother of 3 working double shifts to make ends meet who just cannot manage the physical demands of another pregnancy. The student who made the decision to finish their degree and begin their family on their own terms. No shame, no stigma, no regrets. The young parents who receive the heart-wrenching news that they have miscarried and will need abortion care immediately. I rise today to proclaim, I see you, I love you, and I stand with you. Carry no shame for your health care choice. The only shame is that there are forces at work to deny you it. And while my heart is heavy, my spirit is resolved and determined. Madam Speaker, there are many who have arrived at this moment with newfound outrage at the prospect of this reversal of law. But many of us have been in the trenches of this fight for a long time, and we are not surprised. Reproductive justice organizers, Black, brown, indigenous, disabled, LGBTQ+, folks have been sounding the alarm, raising their voices, putting our bodies on the line in protest as anti-choice lawmakers across the country wage a full-fledged assault on our reproductive rights and freedom for too long. The right to control our own bodies, the right to determine our own fate, the right to decide if and when we have a child has been up for debate in the halls of power. Madam Speaker, we have been called hysterical. We have been called fearmongers. And when I talk about who will disproportionately bear the brunt of this, we have been called race baiters. This is no drill, and I take no joy in saying, I told you so.
Take no joy in telling you I told you so, and this is not a drill. I mean, she also went on in her, I think it was a total of 5 minutes of the video clip I saw, or maybe it was another part of the clip. Maybe there was something else that wasn't all just one floor speech. But what was really interesting, I also thought, and I was sharing this when we were in the process of preparing for today, about how she specifically ties what is happening around, a very powerful minority in this country. We're talking about, the religious right and white evangelical Christians specifically, who are, furthering this attack on bodily autonomy and privacy rights, because it's not just abortion, right? Like, folks have made murmurings about coming for the rights around contraception. We see already moving in certain states that there are attacks on things like people's ability to be able to use something like an IUD, which I know I'm getting super personal with y'all this morning, but we got to talk about it. Because we might think like, oh, that's not really that big of a deal. First off, you shouldn't be running around telling everybody that they need to just go ahead and get IUD because they're going to ban abortion. Like, stop, especially like not Black and other women of color. We have a very, very real history in this country around deprivation of bodily autonomy, forced sterilization, forced birthing, et cetera. So there's a really great 2017 article from Dame magazine that's about like, stop telling everybody to get an IUD. Not everyone can have ID. I personally do have one. It was tough the first almost year using it, but it's been great. But that's my right and my choice. And there is legislation in some parts of the country that people are trying to advance that would remove that choice from people, from like their different types of birth control options even. I mean, and then you have folks who want to access certain types of birth control like an IUD, but they can't afford to because they don't have the insurance. Because even though the thing itself might not be a certain amount of money, you know, you have the doctor's fees. And you know, when you go to the doctor's office and or if you go get a procedure, you have the cost of the procedure, you have to pay for whatever other administrative costs and the doctor's fees and this, you get like 3 different bills for the same thing. It's the same thing when we're talking about reproductive health, right? And a lot of times we're talking about in-office procedures and you still might have multiple different bills and things of that nature. But what I found so powerful when she was talking about is when she tied it to the legacy of white supremacy in this country. And a lot of times we throw out the term white supremacy. And I think we really need to deconstruct it so folks really understand like why it is paramount that is deconstructed, that is dismantled, that is disbanded, because it impacts everyone, white people too. It is oppressing you as well, right? And your silence is complicit, but we can be complicit in our own oppressions. And so when we're thinking about abortion, you know, Ayanna Pressley, Representative Pressley, was talking about the way in which white supremacy has constantly throughout the history, even predating this country, dictated the way in which reproductive bodies have been allowed to reproduce, permitted to reproduce, encourage, force, or deny the ability to reproduce. We talk so much about forced birthing, you know, whether it's during slavery, but there is a history of, as I mentioned a couple of days ago, of forced sterilization as well. You know, the folks want to talk about, oh, this ain't got nothing to do with voting rights. I mean, when you think about Fannie Lou Hamer, while Fannie Lou Hamer, I mean, is definitely someone who is considered when we're talking about the realm of reproductive justice because of the forced sterilization that happened to her, and the right to have a family was denied to her, right? Like that's a part of, we're talking about our rights in a democracy, and we're talking about our fundamental rights as human beings that exist on this earth. That is absolutely one of them. And so I know I have talked a whole lot. I wanted to get to phones, but tomorrow's Friday and I'm back and we'll get to phones tomorrow. But I just want to say, like, it is absolutely our duty to hold people's feet to the fire, whether we voted for you, whether we didn't vote for you. Like, even if they're not listening, turn up, show up, do what you got to do, but then also get behind somebody better that, I mean, this is primary season, and primary season is a time to choose your champion, right? Primary season is also the time to speak to others and start building collectively. But the problem, whether it's progressives, whether it's the Green Party, whether it's Democrats, whomever, the problem that everybody seems to have is a lack of consistency on a scaled up level. We may do it in our small niche spaces, but we need to be consistently building and expanding our ranks across the board. It is not enough to be right on a particular issue. It is not enough to have all the plans if the people in the streets don't know your plans. It's not enough that you have this great person that you admire who's so dope or whatever, but if they're not talking to the people and getting them to turn out to vote, they're not going to win. It's not just the fact that the establishment works against us. That is a big issue. We have establishment forces working against people-powered change makers all the time because the status quo benefits them and changing it for the people does not. However, no matter how much you say you are about the people, if you are not talking to and building with the people, I mean, how's anybody going to be able to benefit from what you're trying to do? So it is 8:28. I appreciate the fellas for letting me kick it with them today. I think I have the pleasure of being on the clock with Miss Georgia Fort coming up soon. So I'm going to kick it over to the Fam Bam on backstage to take you out. And I will see you again tomorrow on the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show. Peace.